Hey YouTube, I thought I'd make a follow-up video on my AC compressor belt delete video. So in my previous video I used this belt, the Gates Micro V K270553. It has a outer circumference of 55 and 7/8 inch. It worked, but I noticed in the cold it started to squeak. And my tensioner was very loose. But now what I've done is I've switched over to this Gates K080545 belt, and it has a outside circumference of 55 and 1/8 inch. So it's 3/4 of an inch shorter, and it seems to be working much better. I don't have the squeaking noise. The problem is that if you've noticed, this is an 8-rib belt. This is a 7-rib belt. Now, how are you going to get an 8-rib belt to work on a 7-rib pulley? Well, there are other videos on YouTube that show you how to cut a rib off of a ribbed belt, and that's precisely what I've done. So, I cut this one rib off the entire circumference very carefully with this utility knife. Now, you want to have good sharp utility knife and change blades frequently, so you always have a sharp edge, and that'll give you a very clean edge. If it were off I could show you, but it's very hard to tell the difference between the factory edge on one side and the edge that I cut. So basically this 8-rib belt is now a 7-rib belt, and since it's 3/4 of an inch tighter, the problem I was running into is if you look at the tensioner, it was actually loose, but right now, as you can see, that bar is lining up. Here, if this will focus. So that bar is lining up with that arrow you can see there. And it's basically at the factory tautness that it would be at if you were running the full serpentine belt from the factory that went around the AC compressor, unlike this one, which, of course, bypasses it, as I mentioned in my previous video. In fact, let me pause and get out the diagram. Alright, so here's the diagram. Essentially what you're doing when you're doing an AC compressor bypass with the belt on this Honda K24 engine is, instead of going around the AC compressor, which is right here, you simply go around the crank pulley, around the water pump pulley, around the alternator, up and around the power steering, past the tensioner, and back down to the crank. So that's how you route it. If you want to pause the video, you can look at this belt routing diagram I have. And, of course, to change out the belt, you would use a wrench, and you just put it on the tensioner pulley. It's kind of hard to see, but it's right there. You just put the wrench on it. In fact, why don't I get the wrench? Alright, so I got the wrench on. So essentially what you do once you have the wrench on the tensioner, as you can see, there's the tensioner pulley down there. You just would simply pull it this way, and it loosens up the tensioner. And you can take off the belt and put on the belt with the same procedure. However, with mine, since it was so tight, I found it actually easier to loop it around the top first, then put it around the crank. To get at the crank, you need to turn the wheel and remove the side cover in there. You can kind of see there's some plastic rivets there. You just undo the 2 or 3 of them, and a little access panel is opened up, and you can access it down there to get onto the crank pulley. So anyway, if you're going to do this, I'd suggest you thread it around everything except for the crank, and then do the crank last while you're... So this crank pulley is done last. You start at the top, you work your way down, and this is what you put it around once you loosen up the tensioner here. You might need 2 people to do that, but I had great success doing it that way. So anyway, if you want to bypass your AC compressor, this is the way to do it, and keep the factory tension on the tensioner. Otherwise, it'll be a bit loose if you use this belt. If you cut a rib off of this belt, It'll be at the factory tension, and you won't have to worry about it squeaking. So anyway, I guess that's all for now. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.